When you're trying to find cash flow, you're looking for a needle in a haystack, but can you buy a property and densify it and manufacture that cash flow and then in the end up with the same product? The answer is absolutely.
Manufacture cash flow rather than chase cash flow on MLS.
When the market is ripping up, and it will again, you'll take advantage of the upswing in rents, you'll take advantage of all the good things that are happening, but you have to already have the asset. Those that are chasing the market will always be chasing the market, and you don't want to be that person.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of Streetwise Wealth. Today's episode is different. It's about deal anatomy, where we're going to dig into the numbers of a rental property. Today's property has 3 units. It's cash flowing $1,327 a month. And at the time my guest purchased this property was not cash flowing. So in today's episode, he's going to show you the strategy that he used, which is called a stage densification, a strategy that works powerfully in Ontario today that will help you manufacture cash flow rather than chase cash flow on MLS. My guest is going to show you how this works end to end, and he's going to dig deep into the numbers and show you how to mitigate the risk in today's Ontario's real estate market. My guest today is JG Francoeur. He is the co-founder and CEO of Visture Property Group, a company that is at the forefront of real estate innovation through coach home developments and that helps investors unlock scalable opportunities in residential real estate. From modest beginnings in Timmins, Ontario, JG has become a prominent figure in the real estate industry, now overseeing a $100 million property portfolio. JG has been featured on major media platforms like Today's Show and ABC News. And he has over 20 years of experience as a serial entrepreneur, building multiple 8-figure companies, operating in 14 countries with teams over 200 people. My team and I had the privilege to support JG on the financing front, and we've experienced firsthand the power of the strategy he's going to share with you today and the methods that he uses to create cash flow. JG is also a best-selling author and a leading voice in property investment, a key player in shaping the future of real estate. JG, welcome to Streetwise Wealth.
It is my absolute pleasure to be here. I'm so excited about digging into the numbers. You know me, I'm a bit of a geek. I'm a bit of a spreadsheet geek, so I can't wait.
We're excited to do that with you today. But before we get into the numbers, JG, I want to ask you a question. I see you all the time on property sites, even on weekends, and you are there on the ground, on the construction site, where at this point in your journey, real estate journey, you could delegate all of this to somebody on your team. Why do you choose to go and visit the sites today yourself?
Well, I gotta say, Visture has an incredible team, where I'm so blessed to have this team that's around me that does 99.999% of the heavy lifting. But, I think it's very important as an investor, and it's something that you and I learned from the greats that came before us, the Patrick Francis of the world, the Don R. Campbells of the world. It's like, you have to delegate, not abdicate. And that's the reason I still go to the sites, whether it's a weekend, whether it's early in the morning, whether it's late at night. I believe in delegating, not abdicating. So I really try to get my feet on the street. I like to see it. I like to touch it. I like to feel it. And that's one of the reasons I do a lot of like coach home tours and building tours. Like, investors cannot be successful in real estate only from a spreadsheet perspective. You have to go there, touch it, feel it, see it, smell it, and then you really are going to understand it.
There are a couple of terms that we're going to talk about today before we get into the numbers, JG. And before we get started, I'd love for you to clarify these terms for our viewers so that there is no confusion. And let's start with the term densification. What's in plain English, what is densification?
So densification typically means that you're adding units to a particular site. So whether it's a single family home and you're adding, a basement suite, that's densification. Whether you're adding a basement, you have a single family home and you're tearing it down and you're building a fourplex, that's densification. Or whether you buy a 12-unit building and you do an addition and you add 6 more units to it and now you have an 18-unit building, that's densification. So anytime you're adding units, you are densifying that land and that site. That's called densification.
And in the residential space, if we have a single family house and we're looking to densify that site, without incurring big developmental charges? How far can we go with densification these days?
Well, that's a moving target, Dalia, but the province of Ontario, as of right, allows any property owner in Ontario to have at least 3. So the baseline answer is at least 3. Now, what is the upper limit of that? That depends on the municipality. Peterborough is just passing a law right now, a bylaw, where you're going to be allowed up to 4. Places like Hamilton have already done it up to 4. Some places have already done up to 6, like in Vancouver. I know it's not Ontario, but in Vancouver, BC, they've done up to 6. So every municipality is going about it their own way. But the answer is at least 3. Many places it's 4, and some places it's up to 6.
Okay. Let's talk about manufacturing cash flow. What does that mean in English?
Well, so there's two, a lot of people understand that when you're investing in real estate, that's the holy grail of real estate. It's like if you're just relying on appreciation, that's a very risky game. I mean, that's kind of like going to, that's like going to the casino, not something that we would recommend. But when you're looking for cash flow, there's 2 ways of cash flow. You can either look for cash flow and try to find that cash flow, or you can create the cash flow or manufacture the cash flow. And that's the strategy I'm much more in tune to follow. And the reason for that is because it's much more predictable. It's much more consistent, and you know what you're going to get. When you're trying to find cash flow, you're looking for a needle in a haystack. You're literally hoping to find this cash flow. Like it's like walking down the street and hoping you're going to find $100 bills or gold bars on the ground. I mean, if you're there, someone else probably would have grabbed them. But can you buy a property and densify it and manufacture that cash flow, and then in the end end up with the same product? The answer is absolutely.
I think part of the challenge in Ontario right now is finding cash flowing properties. And on the financing side, I see a lot of deals, and yeah, there is cash flow, but you have to go very remote in sometimes. And I know the power of the strategy you're going to talk about today is that you can still play in beautiful markets and create cash flow in these markets. So excited to dig deeper. What you utilize an approach called staged densification. Tell us a little bit more about that. What does that mean?
So we've already talked about what densification is. Now, if you think about stage densification, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's doing the densification in stages. And there's several reasons, and we'll talk about it on this show, no doubt, why a stage densification approach is sometimes better, safer, less risky than a full densification. When you do a full densification from the get-go, you're doing the entire project, meaning you're taking on all of the risk up front, you're taking on all the expense up front, you're putting in all the capital up front. But when you do it in a staged approach, and not every project allows for a staged densifications, the ones we mostly do allow, because that's what we're searching for. But that's what a staged densification is. It allows you to do the densification project over the course of time in various stages. Sometimes it's 2 stages, sometimes it's 3 stages. Really depends on the project.
Okay, let's now take a look at the property that you've transformed and talk about the process and talk about the numbers. So JG, now you can put up the pictures of the property.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, JG, walk us through the day you saw this property. Where is this property located? What condition was it in, and what was the seller situation?
So this property's in Peterborough, Ontario, and this is on a street called Cartier Boulevard. And this is quite close to Trent University. And what made this property so incredible is, as you can see, it's 1970s, late 60s, early 70s brick bungalow. And as you can see from the outside looked like it was in really good shape. The yard was in really good shape. I mean, the inside required quite a bit of updates. I mean, this was kind of like grandma and grandpa's, basement, the one I'm talking about with the shag rugs and, that kind of stuff. So what was great about this property, and the reason I fell in love with it, it has really good bones. I bought it for a good price, but at the end of the day, it had really good bones, meaning the structure of the building was in good shape. The upstairs had been modernized, so it had some nice hardwood floors. It was easy to separate. This is what's called this has a front entrance, which you can see here on the picture. And that's also got a side entrance, which you can see here as well. So you can see that it's very easy to divide. The upper and the lower is going to be very easy to divide. And that's always a nice, bonus feature. So those are the 2 things that kind of first stood out to me. But ultimately what made this property amazing for this stage densification project was the size of the lot. This is a 7,300 square foot lot, or just under, like 7,250, I think, is that. And any lot that is over 7,000 square feet lends itself really, really well to the kinds of projects we like to do, where we do stage densification. So far, when I saw just these two pictures, I knew right away this property had a lot of potential. And then the fact that it had a relatively good entry price, the rest after that, it can flow pretty quickly once you know what you're looking for.
And what do you look for in parking, knowing that you're going to add more units as a filtering criteria?
So I'm always looking to put at least 4 parking spots. And on paper, I can do it tandem, meaning back to back to back to back. But listen, we all know in actuality, in property management terms, tandem parking doesn't work. I mean, that just doesn't work. So the answer is 4 parking spots is what I'm always looking for. And this property definitely had it. There was parking for at least 4 at the front. Plus, I could park probably 2 down the side, right where you could see this car is here. And then my plan was to create more parking at the back, which is what we ended up doing. And I'll show you that at the site plan stage, where we actually created, parking at the front and parking at the back. And this under the carport, we actually made that a thoroughfare.
And going into this deal, at this point, you have an eye for deals. You know what's going to work, what's not going to work. You talked about the lot size, you talked about the parking here, you talked about the condition. But in terms of zoning, did you do your zoning due diligence as part of your conditions here, or did you go into the deal knowing that this area allows you to get to 3 units? How would someone know that?
That's the beauty, is that now with the new Bill 23 that Doug Ford passed a couple of years ago, you're allowed up to 3 units on any piece of land anywhere in Ontario, no matter the zoning. So zoning used to be really critical. You'd have to make sure that you were an R2 or an R3 or whatever the codes are in your municipality. In my neck of the woods, we use R1, R2, R3, R4. But now it doesn't matter. So this isn't as important as it used to be. And back in the day, Dalia, and when I say back in the day, I mean like just a couple of years ago, there were so few properties that allowed for a stage densification project like this. So few, because you had to have R2 or R3, and you had to have the parking, and you had to have the setbacks, and it was just it was very complicated, and very few properties could hit all of the numbers. As a result, it was kind of like a holy grail. But then when Doug Ford passed that new legislation, Bill 23, it changed everything, because all of those requirements crumbled, and now you're able to put up to 3 units on any property as long as you can meet some of the basics. So, and one of those basics is you got to be able to get the parking in. And in Peterborough, that means 4 spots. And most places it means 4 spots, by the way. So that's one of the biggest things we're looking for. But zoning, not as much of a problem as it used to be.
Beautiful. Visture operates in which markets, JG? Peterborough, Barrie, Orillia, Lindsay, right?
That's right. Plus Oshawa as well. And then anything surrounding those markets. So we do Cobourg, we do Port Hope, we do Peterborough, we do City of Kawartha Lakes, Lindsay, Orillia, Barrie, so Huntsville, Hamilton. Those are all the markets we operate in.
And what pulled you towards these markets? What did you see in these markets that made you go, this is a great market for me to deploy this strategy?
Well, you and I have the same belief systems when it comes to real estate, which is real estate has to be supported by fundamentals. Every one of these markets is a very strong economic growth engine. It has a growing population. It has, a growing population base. It has a growing GDP base. It has growing employment. It has, it's typically benefiting from a transportation effect. It also could be benefiting from kind of Toronto just being too dense and people wanting to move out. So that it also benefits from that. Every one of those markets has many things going for it, but they're all backed by fundamentals. And the best part about every one of those markets I talked about is I'm always curious and I'm always watching to see what is my entry price into the real estate market versus the rental price versus the rental demand. I'll give you a perfect example. Peterborough and Oshawa, for those that are familiar with the two markets, they're very close. Like Peterborough to Oshawa is 45 minutes. I mean, they're side by side. They're cousins in a sense. People from Oshawa probably don't believe that, but that's the truth. From a real estate perspective, they're right beside each other. You can get into the market in Peterborough for say 500, 525, 550 for sure. You can get into the market in Oshawa for like 600, 700, 800, 850. So there's a delta there between $100,000 and $200,000 between the two markets. But here's the best part. The rents in Peterborough are stronger than Oshawa, and the demand for rent in Peterborough is better than Oshawa. That's what I'm looking for. That's called an asymmetric risk to reward ratio. And that's what I look for. And every market I invest in gets that. I'll give you another perfect example. Barrie to Aurelia, they're cousins. They're side by side. They're 20 minutes apart. The Aurelia market, you can get into the Aurelia market for $200,000 less. The rent is better than Barrie. And I own rentals in both, so I know intimately. And the demand is just as strong in Aurelia as it is in Barrie, but my risk reward is much better in Aurelia. Those are two good examples of why I love those markets.
Great, and thank you for sharing how you go about evaluating these markets, because for our listeners here, if you're wondering how you evaluate a market to deploy the strategy JG just shared with you, the filtering criteria, it doesn't mean that you can do the strategy in a market, but if you want the results, if you want to make sure that you're managing risk, right, the criteria that JG used is important to keep in mind. So thank you for sharing that, JG. Let's talk about the stages of densification. Tell us about this property. So you bought this property as a single family home, and walk us through what you've done with it from a stage standpoint and a process standpoint and a timeline standpoint.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So in terms of stages, anytime you do a stage densification, the way we do it when you're converting a single family home to 3 units, what we always do is the first thing that we do is we go in and we separate the top from the bottom. So when we purchased this property, I believe it was March 1st. And by March 14th, the upper unit had been already separated from the lower unit. And we had put the upper unit on the market. So in the first 14 days, we build a wall to separate the upper and the lower. It's a fire rated wall. So that way there's no separation issue. We take pictures of everything. We then renovate the upstairs. We did a quick little paint job. We did a little bit of flooring. We opened up, in this case, we didn't do anything in the kitchen. We installed some HVAC. We installed heat pumps in this particular case, and we separated the hydrometers, the upper hydrometer from the lower hydrometer. And that's a big thing that we love to do. We love to separate utilities. I really don't like mixing utilities and properties. It just leads to property management issues, and it also leads to reselling issues later in the property's life. So I like to separate the utilities if I can. I definitely do that. And within 14 days, we had done that. Place had been renovated. Place looked like $1 million. It had been separated, the upper from the lower. The HVAC had been separated, and the utilities, the hydro had been separated, and we put it on the market. Within another 14 days, so that means 30 days after ownership, that top floor was rented and was earning money. And that's the key. That's the key right there to stage densification. If I did the whole property all at once, I wouldn't be making that money. But because we do it in stages, we immediately separate the top from the bottom and we rent the top.
I love this. I love how you are putting the property into work for you in the shortest period possible, while continuing to improve it instead of waiting for everything to happen and then putting it on the market. That's brilliant. So you separated the units, you rented the upstairs, and then you started working on the legalization of the basement. How long did that take you before you were able to put it back on the market?
So we actually had our building permits submitted before we closed on the property. So when we buy the property, we make the current owners sign what's called an authorization to act, and it gives us the ability to then apply for building permits before we even own the property. And that's what we did. So after the 14 days of separating the top from the bottom, we already had our building permit in hand, and we immediately started on the construction of the lower. Now upstairs, in this particular case, I forget how, I'll share the numbers after, but the upstairs renovation was relatively minor. I think it cost $40,000 or $50,000, something like that. The downstairs renovation was a completely different beast. So that was a full gut job. We went right back to the foundation. We took everything out of there. We chipped up the floor. We put in new plumbing. We got ready for the coach house, which I'll talk about after. That's absolutely critical that you do that at the right point. And that one there was a much higher budget. Cost us a little over $150,000 for that lower unit. And that was completed essentially 8 weeks, so 2 months. after possession of the property, we're able to put that unit on the market and then get that one rented as well right away. So typically within 3 months, 2 to 3 months, the single family house has been completely split and completely rented and is now generating positive cash flow.
I love how efficient the process is. We're going to talk about risk mitigation shortly, but let's talk about the permit. So you seek that permit before you closed. Did you have it as a condition in your deal? And the other question is, how long did it take you to get the permit?
Getting the permit is not conditional on the deal, but them signing an authorization to act is conditional in the deal. And then as long as I have an authorization to act from the current seller, I'm able to do what I got to do. Getting permits for us, with our reputation, we do hundreds of projects in the municipalities we operate in. And as a result, they know us. They know our projects are good. They know our projects are fast. So we get our permits actually quite quickly. In Peterborough right now, it takes us somewhere between roughly 14 to 28 days to get a permit. And it really depends on what kind of permit we're going for and so on and so forth. But in this case, we typically 2 to 4 weeks, we have a permit.
Okay, let's talk about the ADU, which is the third stage of this project.
Yeah. So, and coming back to what attracted me about that property, the minute I saw the backyard, and here you can see a picture on the screen of us digging for the coach home here. But look at that backyard. I mean, absolutely incredible. You're backing onto a park. It's a nice big backyard. You're not going to be tight for space back there. And ultimately, that's what makes these properties extremely valuable. When you find a property that can handle a coach home in the backyard, that is not going to be like you're sticking a shoebox in someone else's backyard. This property looks incredible. So as soon as I saw this backyard, I knew this property would be good for a stage densification project. And then after you do the top and then you do the bottom in the main house, you move on to the coach house. And as you can see here, we're excavating for the coach house. This was essentially, about 30 minutes after starting, I took this picture. But this is where it's critical that you have to prepare this project all at the same time. And what I mean by that is, when you're doing the basement renovation, you have to start thinking about the utilities of the coach house. How are you going to run the sewer? How are you going to run the water? Are you running that through the main house, or are you running it out to the curb? What are the local bylaws? What are the local, municipality regulations that you have to adhere to? Once you know these things, then because if you don't do this in the right order, you could just cost yourself a ton of money by doing it wrong. So in our particular case, once we start the coach house, we typically build a coach house. Like from this very day, that coach house is built. This coach house was built in 88 days after, and it was built and rented in 88 days from this particular picture right here I took, which is quite fast and incredible. Actually, since doing this project, we now get them done in about 75 days.
Incredible. And I'm just going to put on my financing hat here briefly, guys. As part of the stages, we also take out the equity upon the completion of the stages. We don't wait until the end to take it all out, because this way, JG is not tying all of that capital into the deal until everything is completed. So that's the beauty also about this strategy. As you improve the asset, the value goes up. And we plan for that upfront from a money standpoint. And then we tap into that upside on completion and then roll over to the next stage. So everything here is happening in stages, both on the financing side and on the construction side. Okay, JG, do you want to share with us some pictures about the progression of the project before we dig into the math?
Yeah, absolutely. So these projects, as I say, they happen quite quickly, especially if you're working with a company like Visture. We typically are doing it twice as fast as everybody else. But nonetheless, you can see here that as you start excavation, your first step is you're going to have to make a decision. I don't want to get too technical on the construction side of things here, Dalia, but you're going to have to make a decision whether you're going to do a frost wall, whether you're going to do a full basement, or whether you're going to do a slab on grade. And that has a big impact on your budget, because slab on grade is the cheapest way to do it. If you're adding a frost wall, you're typically adding about $20,000 of costs, $15,000 to $20,000. And if you're doing a full basement, you're adding about $50,000 of costs. So that's important for people to realize. But these things go up really, really quickly. As you can see here, from the day we started, within about 7 days, we were here. And then once we get the slab on there, we completely frame them in essentially 4 days. So they go up really, really quickly. And that's why we're able to get them not only built, but fully rented typically in somewhere between 75 and 88 days. Right now, our record is 75 days. That is site specific, but we've done several under 88 days now, which is always a great way to go, because at the end of the day, time is money for investors. So speed is of the essence.
In terms of timing, JG, do you care about the season in which you're doing the construction, like wintertime versus springtime versus summer, or it doesn't really matter?
I would say it doesn't matter, but it does matter. We build year round, 12 months of the year we build. It doesn't matter if it's summer, if it's winter, we're constantly building. But building in the winter is a little bit slower because you're dealing with weather elements. And the second thing is also a little bit more expensive. So that is something to take into account. However, if you consider the difference between, let's just say you purchase a project in September, and instead of starting construction in October or November, you decide you're going to wait until the spring, you're going to wait until April or May, you've lost all of that. You've lost all those months of rent. So in the end, it ends up being cheaper. Even though it's more expensive to build, your ROI is better for you to start as soon as you can, even if it's in the winter. And that's why we do it the way we do it at Visture.
Great tip. Let's dig into the math.
Okay, so let's dig into the numbers, Dalia. So we purchased this property for $530,000. The purchase price of the property was actually $525,000, but then we paid a $5,000 assignment fee. So in the end, we paid $530,000 for the property. And that is a very good entry point. If you're entering these properties for somewhere between $500,000 and $550,000 in the market of Peterborough, you're typically going to do quite well, as you can see. And I'll show you as I go through the rest of the numbers. But we purchased it for $530,000. That was our original entry price. Our goal was to rent the first unit for $2,200, the second unit for $1,850, and the third unit, which is the coach home, for $2,200. That was our goal. So our goal was to have a total rental income on a monthly basis of $6,250. And if we were to do that, we would end up generating a net cash flow of $624 a month. So these are our numbers going in. That's what we wanted to do. Now, let me tell you how it actually turned out, because in this case, and in many cases, it turned out better than expected. So let me get into the actual numbers of how it turned out. So when we bought it for $530,000, we ended up putting about $30,000 into the single family renovation. That means that upstairs, when we did that HVAC work, when we did the paint job, when we did some of those things, it was about $30,000. So at that point, we're about $560,000 into the build at this point. And it's only a single family home. You're only renting one unit. And so you're still losing money. Your rental income is about $2,800. But by the time you factor in your mortgage payment and your taxes and your insurance and your property management, you're losing about $239 a month. So there's no point in stopping here. You have to keep going. When you add the second unit, or the duplex, or the basement suite, however you want to call it, now your entry point is $560. How did I get there? Well, $530 plus the $30,000 upper unit renovation is $560. So that $560 carries on. And now that's my starting point for the lower. In this case, I put $170,000 into the lower unit. So total, I'm into this project now for $730,000. Now, here comes the beautiful thing. And Dalia, I can't promise this is always going to happen. I can tell you that has happened to me many times, but I can't promise this to anybody. But at this point, as you can see, based on these numbers, you're into the project for $730,000 total, but you've appraised for $830,000. That delta there, that $100,000, that's equity. So you, in this case, Streetwise, financed this property, got us financing on this property for $664,000. That's 80% of $830,000, meaning we were left with $66,000 of cash into the deal. So if we stopped right here, and you can, by the way, that's the other thing that's beautiful about stage densification, is you don't have to keep going. If you don't want to, if it makes sense for you to stop with 2 units, then you can. And if I was to stop here with 2 units, I would be generating a rent income of $4,700 a month. My mortgage payments would be $3,170. I pay $400 of taxes, $150 of insurance, $329 of property management. So I'd be net cash flow positive $651 a month. And let me tell you, Dalia, I don't know about you, but at $651 a month, I'm okay to hold on to that property. right? What do you think? Is that a pretty good cash flow? We've only added one of the 2 units and we're still doing quite well, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you.
And the best part is now you're not appreciating, your annual appreciation gains are not just $28,000. Now your annual appreciation gains are $41,000. And the reason is because the value is just that much more, not only profitable, but the property is that much more valuable. As a result, it appreciates that much faster. Then the third part and the final phase is doing the coach home. Now, I'm into the property for $730,000, as you can see here. The coach home in this case was $230,000. These are all pre-tax numbers, by the way, guys. So I built the coach home for $230,000. So I'm into the total project now for $960,000. This project appraised for $1.1 million, which is roughly what I see on all the projects. $1 million, 1.025, 1.05, 1.1, 1.5, 1.15. And I've seen up to 1.2, but that was before the market came down. So right now, my estimates are somewhere between 1.05 and 1.1 million, but this one did appraise for 1.1 million. You at Streetwise got us $880,000 of financing for it, meaning we're only $80,000 cash into this deal. But now, remember, my original estimate was that we would generate $6,250 in rent, if you remember. But in fact, we are generating $6,750 in rent on this property. We're paying $4,201 in mortgages, $500 in taxes, $250 in insurance, and $473 in property management. So the net positive cash flow on this property is $1,327 per month. And we are appreciating this property by $55,000 a year. So the total ROI on a 10-year period on this property is 2,339%, which sounds ludicrous and crazy. But at the end of the day, you're only $80,000 into this deal. That's the only cash you got in this thing. So literally within 3 years, you have totally, just the cash flow alone has almost cashed you out. And if you refinance within 3 to 5 years, you are definitely into the infinite return on investment game. And that's the game I like to play.
Yeah, very powerful, JG. And for our viewers here, you guys could see how powerful this strategy is. And typically the next natural question is, how did you finance this deal? How do you structure financing here? So I'm just going to put on my financing hat on and share with you a couple of strategies. And everybody's situation is different. But ideally, what we want to do when it comes to financing these units is we want to plan for each stage ahead of time. We want to go to a lender where we get you a cost-effective mortgage early on, keep your options open, and then going into the deal, we want to know what the complete value is going to be so that we are running the numbers upfront on how we're going to go back to that lender to get money out. Okay, so in this particular deal that JG shared with you, that's where we did what we did. We went to a bank and we got initially 80% mortgage on the property. And going in, we know what the complete value is going to be. We worked with an appraiser who is on the lender's list. And once JG was done, we went and revalued the property, knew that JG is going to qualify for the mortgage, and we got that extra money out. And ideally, you can get it out through a line of credit without breaking the mortgage, or if you want to roll it into the mortgage or create a parallel mortgage, there are products that allow you to do that. And we do the same thing for stage 2. But there are investors that may qualify for a different type of financing. And I'm just going to give you here some ideas. There are lenders on the street right now that will actually give you money to renovate and actually to build. So in JG's case, he had his own resources to create these units, but the mortgages that we've set up for him allowed him to recycle the capital and move on to the stages efficiently. But there are lenders on the street that will give you money to build and to renovate, and then you're not putting money out of your pocket to fund the project. They're giving it to you in tandem with the mortgage. And as you finish, they roll it into a long-term mortgage. These lenders I actually love working with because that saves you money. And in a way, there is no guarantee, but it does reduce your risk of exit. Now, I've also seen investors, again, depending on how fast they want to move and what capital is available to them. I've seen investors use private money. I've seen investors use HELOC money. I've seen investors use JV money. So depending on your situation, we can orchestrate a financing strategy to help you move your capital and not lock as much capital into the project. So back to you, JG. I just wanted to comment on financing because I know that people look at the numbers and go, okay, like how did you actually do this from a mortgage or money standpoint?
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about this whole thing is there are some great programs. And Dalia, you and I have been doing this for many, many years. And there hasn't always been great programs like this. At the beginning, it was much harder, but as time goes on, it's getting better and better and better and easier to do these kinds of things. And that's why you and I refer to this tactic as manufacturing cash flow and manufacturing a great deal because you started this deal with $112,000 into the deal being cash flow negative, and you ended being only $80,000 in, so less cash into the deal, and generating $1,327 a month. That's creating cash flow. And that's much more consistent than just hoping that you find a good deal on MLS.
Yeah, and JG, you and I did a 1-hour class digging deeper into the deal numbers and also all of the financing options available. And for our viewers, you guys can go to the Streetwise Vault and access this class for free, and it will help you connect a lot of dots. And also JG is sharing with us the detailed analysis on the deal that you've seen today in the Streetwise Vault. So go there today. The link is in the description of this video.
And I'm also Dalia, going to share the Coach Home Buyers Guide as well with your audience. And that Coach Home Buyers Guide is going to allow them to identify the right piece of property to purchase in order to do a coach home. So not every property is good for a stage densification. You have to find the right property. They're definitely out there. There's no doubt about that. Now is a fantastic time to be looking at them, but you got to know what you're looking for. And that's why I put together this buyer's guide.
That's huge, JJ. Thank you. Very, very helpful. You guys go to the vault and you should see it there as well. JJ, I want to talk about the elephant in the room. There is a big elephant in the room right now in Ontario. And the elephant in the room is appraisals are soft. We're in a market where values are soft in some areas. Rents are decreasing in some other areas. There is obviously a little bit of uncertainty. I've seen you do this in several market cycles. So share with us, how do you mitigate the risk in this environment that we're in right now? Because I'm sure, and I've seen you do a lot of numbers crunching, but share with us, how do you go into these deals, planning for uncertainties and mitigating the risk in this environment that we're in?
Well, the best answer for that is you have to have access to the cash. And whether it's your cash, whether it's line of credit, whether it's partners, whether it's being financed, you don't want to get into these projects and not have access to the cash, because the biggest risk to the bank, the lenders, and yourself is to start and not finish. That's the worst case scenario. You don't want to start this and not finish, because then you're definitely in deep doo-doo. So that would be the number one risk mitigating factor. If you have access to the cash, you're confident in that, and you have enough to weather the storm, you're good to go. But I will say this, Dalia, you're right. I've done this in all of the market cycles. I've done it during the boom. I've done it through the recovery. I've done it through the downturn. I've done it in all market cycles. Different market cycles allow you to benefit from different parts of real estate. What I mean by that, right now, the appraisals are a little soft. You're absolutely right. The rents are stable, but not climbing, and a little bit soft, but not too bad. But the entry price is so good. When you're going through the boom, yes, financing might be a little bit much better. Your appraisals will be much better. Rents will be better, but you'll be overpaying for the property. So the formula has to work. At the end of the day, you have to run your numbers, and the formula just has to work. And you just have to realize that at different parts of the cycle, you're dealing with different elements, that some of them are more positive than usual and some of them are more tougher than usual. And this part of the market cycle, the thing that's beautiful about this is that you're controlling your entry price. You are getting in at the very best time you possibly can. And I'll tell you why, Dalia. When the market is ripping up, and it will return, my friends. It always goes in cycles. And we're in the bottom part of the cycle, but it will come back over time. when the market is ripping and roaring, going up, if you already have control of the asset, you could refinance it. You can take advantage of that up market. You'll take advantage of the upswing in rents. You'll take advantage of all the good things that are happening, but you have to already have the asset. The problem is that people want to take advantage of all that, but they don't have the asset. They haven't purchased it. As a result, they go purchase an asset, a house, a single family home, whatever the case may be, but now they're overpaying for that asset in order to take advantage of the benefits. So right now, yes, you have to have more fortitude. There's no doubt about it. You have to be more positive. Dalia, you and I joke that we are the eternal optimists, you and I. But the fact is that, for those that have the fortitude to get through the tough times of this market, you will benefit that much more from the asymmetric upside in 12 months, in 24 months, in 36 months. Those that are chasing the market will always be chasing the market, and you don't want to be that person.
And are you also looking in a market like this, JG, to keep some of the money in the deal where in the peak cycles of 2021 and 2020, like the wave was going up and up and up and up, and literally with minimal improvements to an asset, you would see it rise in value. So are you being more conservative in terms of your as complete projections these days?
I am always, even in boom times, I'm always looking to leave 20% of my cash in that asset. If I can't afford to leave 20% of my cash in that asset, I'm not doing it. And this is where people get caught, in my opinion, is they don't want to do the deal unless they can get all of their cash out. And even in the boom times, yes, sometimes that might happen. But the fact is this, in real estate, you're always going to get your cash out. It may not happen in the first 6 months. It may take you 3 years. It may take you 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, but you're going to end up getting your cash out because you're going to end up refinancing that. And that's what makes real estate so powerful. But it's the people that have to get their cash out in 6 months or 12 months, or they can't feed their kids. That's risky. That's what you want to be very, very careful of. But the fact is that in real estate, if you do it well, and if you manufacture cash flow the way we talked about in this episode, you're definitely getting your cash out. I always aim to leave about 20% of my cash for at least 3 years. If I can weather that storm, then I'm going to be safe.
So that takes us to the typical mistakes investors make. What have you seen? What are the top mistakes you've observed investors make when it comes to deploying a densification strategy?
The number one mistake they make is they try to save money by doing the work themselves. And as a result, if they know how to do the work themselves, great. But most people don't know how to do the work themselves. And they try to save money. They figure it's not worth hiring a professional contracting company like Visture, like anybody else. And as a result, they end up making a bunch of mistakes. It costs them twice as much and it takes them 4 times as long. And they end up in the process risking the very thing I told them not to risk, which is you got to make sure you finish this project. And oftentimes when you do it yourself, you run into unexpected things you didn't necessarily project. And as a result, you threaten the very asset itself. And that is the number one mistake I see. So people trying to do it themselves just to save a buck is a big red flag. And I would encourage anyone who's looking at doing this project, if you can't figure out the right deal to afford to get a good company to help you and partner with you on this, then you should maybe look at another tactic. You should maybe look at another strategy. You should maybe look at another market, because the fact is that these are not easy projects. They're incredible, but when you're manufacturing the kind of cash flow we just talked about in this episode, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a ton of tricky situations. There's a lot of wasp's nests that the average investor can get stuck into. You need a good partner who's done it before, who's been there before, who can anticipate these problems and keep you as the investor out of those challenges. And I would say that's probably the number one mistake I see.
Yeah, it's one thing to see the numbers on paper, and it's another thing to execute and manage execution risk. So, and I see that with investors from time to time. And on the mistakes front, on the financing front, guys, there are 2 fatal mistakes that we see investors make. One is not validating your mortgage exit scenarios upfront and assuming that the value is gonna come in at X and assuming that you're going to get a bank mortgage and assuming that you're going to get 80% at certain number of rates. That's what we're aiming for. But these are assumptions and have to be validated based on your personal circumstances and the project numbers upfront, not when the work is done. So that's a big mistake. And the other one is high leverage. I've seen investors go highly leveraged into these projects using promissory notes to renovate and private money and JV money. And don't get me wrong, all of these are creative strategies, and part of real estate investing is to figure out your capital stack and at times to use other people's money. But in an environment where the valuations are soft and there is a little bit of uncertainty, you want to be very careful with how far you leverage something and for how long you leverage. Because what I've seen when this cycle started to happen, unfortunately, investors who were highly leveraged could not pay back that money, and it started to add pressure to their finances. So between what JG shared and what I'm sharing with you guys, take this to heart, because that's how you mitigate the risk. And if you know how to execute and have the right partner by your side, this strategy is so powerful. And that's how you make money in today's environment, and it positions you well for the long run as well. JG, if our viewers want to learn more about Visture and your services and coach home programs, where can they go?
Best place is to go to visture.ca, so visture.ca. And there's a bunch of, we have a ton of great resources there. We have a ton of free courses. We have different guides for them to download. And we can help them. And we help a lot of investors, especially if they're shopping for real estate. I have project consultants that will go through your property even before you buy it to make sure it's the right property and that it qualifies for this kind of program and that it'll work well for this kind of program. So I would say go to visture.ca and then join one of our various building tours. Contact us, engage one of my project consultants that can help you evaluate a deal, whether it's a good deal. I even have coach home calculators on the website as well, Dalia. So there's tons of resources for people. And I love giving back. I love being a part of these various communities. And the reason for that is because I was once watching this. I was once on the outside looking in saying, how do I do this? And, over the last 15 years, we've developed an incredible system that works really, really, really well. And now part of me giving back is helping others get into this game.
And Gigi, we appreciate you sharing the Coach Home checklist and also the resources that are available to you guys on this topic in the Vault. You can access it through the link in the description of this video. But also, as part of the Vault, we will be doing live segments with JG down the road. So watch for those. These are segments where, JG and I will show up live, answer your questions, and you can be part of that, again, for free to help you guys make an informed decision in this environment in the Streetwise Vault. So JG, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for showing us the numbers, for showing us the process, for sharing how we manage the risk. We really appreciate it.
No, it's my very pleasure. And you keep up the great work. You and Streetwise, you guys are best in class.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. I will see you in the next episode. And for now, stay streetwise.